The Genesis Xenon 800 is a lightweight gaming mouse that is advertised to be cheap, offer a great performance and uses high quality components. The beating heart of this mouse is the Pixart PMW3389 optical sensor, and for $40 or euros, this mouse looks to be the deal of the century, and in this review, we will put that to the test. The Xenon 800 is a lightweight gaming mouse that has a lot of features for its low price tag. I say low because at around $40 or euros, this mouse is packing a lot of kit, especially when compared to the bigger and more expensive mice we have seen on the market. For starters, this mouse uses the Pixart PWM3389 optical sensor, a sensor that can go up to 16,000 dpi and has a maximum tracking speed of 400 inches per second and an acceleration of 50 G. Not only that, but the Xenon 800 has a removable top cover that will not only reduce its total weight but give you the option of using the mouse with either a perforated top cover or a solid cover, making it more versatile. And if that was not enough, this mouse comes with an adjustable weight system and a lot of RGB LEDs, alongside Huano and Omron mechanical switches. All this for the same price of $40 seems kinda be suspicious, but I have seen this mouse here and it is legit. But first, let's see the design of this mouse, and frankly it's good. The mouse has a matte black casing that is made entirely out of plastic, as is the case these days to not only keep the cost low but the weight low too. Speaking of the weights, this mouse weighs in at 58 grams, and that weight can be modified with the included weight system and the added top solid panel. One of the things that this mouse does have is the adjustable weight system and what appears to be someone with a sense of humor in the engineering department, because this is how the slot for the weights looks like while there are no weights installed. You might be the judge of that. When it comes to the RGB, there is a lot to talk about. For starters, the RGB LEDs are not only installed on the scroll wheel, but around the back of the mouse as well. I say around because that's what they are, located around the rear, in the shape of a line that meets next to the Genesis logo. Speaking of this logo, it is installed on the inside of the mouse and you can see it through the honeycombs cutouts. However, thanks to the way the casing of this mouse is shaped and well perforated, the RGB LEDs are easily visible from all angles. The Xenon 800 has a sloped design and is not ambidextrous at all. To achieve its low weight, the entire casing has honeycomb perforations. This removal of material is what lowers the weight of the mouse and gives it its unique look. I say unique, but everyone has been using this design lately, so not really that unique. The left side of the mouse features two glossy buttons. Those are by default mapped as the forwards and backwards buttons, but they can be configured in the software to do whatever you want, so no worries there. The tactile feedback of these two buttons is great as they are not mushy at all, and that's mainly because the buttons use genuine mechanical switches and not some basic membrane buttons. The underside of this mouse is simple in its design. The pre-installed Teflon scales are white for some reason and fit well on the plastic bottom of the mouse. Next to the optical sensor, you have a small switch that can set the pulling rate between 125, 500 and 1000 Hz. Weirdly enough though, this switch is not mentioned anywhere on the Genesis website or on the user manual of the mouse, but we know what it does, so there's that. Disassembling this mouse is very easy as it only uses two screws to keep both parts of the casing together. The screws are hidden behind the rear Teflon scales, so you need to peel those off to gain access. With the upper casing removed, we get a good look at the internal components used with this mouse, and things are looking great. The main clicks are using Omron D2FC-F-7N mechanical switches, which have a reliability of 20 million clicks. These switches are regarded as one of the best for gaming usage and have been widely used in high-end gaming mice for a few years now. So seeing them here in this mouse, that is not exactly the most expensive thing in the world, is impressive. The scroll wheel middle click is using a Huano blue switch, and the encoder of the scroll wheel is made by F-switch, and it has a brown casing and core. The side buttons are also using mechanical switches, but in this case we have Huano yellow plunger mechanical switches, which are just as good, especially for side button usage. This little socket is in fact the cable of the mouse, which is removable, and thus you can replace your cable at any time for a different one, or if you manage to damage it somehow. The ergonomics with the Xenon 800 are great. The mouse has a slight slope towards the right and the index finger has a good place to sit. The same can be said for the rest of the fingers too. However, if your hand is too wide, you will be left with no room for the side of the hand, and thus you'll need a wider mouse because this one is not exactly the widest in the bunch. The cable of this mouse is good, quite flexible and long at 1.8 meter long. It ends with a regular USB 2.0 which is gold plated for reliability, and that's about it. It also has a good quality sleeving protecting the wires inside, so there's always a bonus to see on a cheaper-ish mouse. The performance with the Genesis Xenon 800 is good. The Pixart PMW4389 optical sensor does its job, and there's a good reason why this sensor at some point was the most used optical sensor in the world, because it delivers a great performance especially in gaming and low latency scenarios. The buttons on this mouse are really good, mainly thanks to the usage of Omron and Huano switches as well. With testing, we can use a small piece of software that is called Mouse Tester. What this software is doing is testing the performance of the sensor used on the tested mouse and plot a chart for us. In this case, we are using two DPI values, one at 1600 DPI and the other at 16000 DPI, and both are looking good with minimal spread across the board. The next test is using Microsoft Paint. It's a simple test meant to highlight any issues with the sensor tracking on both types of mouse pads. And in the case of this mouse, everything is tracking correctly on any surface. The Genesis Xenon 800 is a good value mouse. It has a lot of features and the build quality is great. The same can be said for the PCB inside and for the plastic casing on the outside. The performance of this mouse is good, as you'd expect it from a mouse that uses the Pixart PMW4389 optical sensor. The buttons have a good tactile feedback as only high quality mechanical switches are used here. Omron for the main clicks and Huano for the rest of the buttons except the DPI cycle button, but it's not like you're going to use that one very often anyway. If there's something to complain here, is the lack of availability with this mouse and perhaps more color options in the future. As for the performance, everything is feeling good. Unfortunately for left-handed users, this mouse is not usable at all, which is quite unfortunate. If you like this review, then you might consider subscribing for more, and also if you want to support me in a direct way, then in the description below you will find the links for both the Patreon and Subscriber pages of this channel.